Republicans lodged their last-ditch protest against marijuana rescheduling, you guys. That's right. Republicans are making a last push against the finalization of the Biden administration's move to reschedule marijuana, despite advocates saying the fight isn't worth the effort. The White House in May began the formal rulemaking process to move marijuana from a Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, the CSA, of drugs considered to have the highest potential for abuse with no accepted medical use, to a Schedule 3 drugs considered to have a moderate to low potential for physical and psychological dependence, you guys. And that's interesting. The comment period for this rule ended last week with an analysis finding over 40,000 comments had been submitted, a majority in favor of the change. And among the comments was a 42-page letter from 11 GOP state attorney generals speaking out against the move to reschedule, you guys. In the letter to the Attorney General Merrick Garland, the attorneys general acknowledged that rescheduling doesn't remove the roadblocks keeping the marijuana industry from being fully integrated into the U.S. economy, but argued that it is a step toward normalizing marijuana businesses, you guys. They cited 5 specific reasons why marijuana should not be rescheduled. The proposed rule was not signed by the DEA administrator, Annie Milligram, and rescheduling would violate the U.S.'s international treaty obligations. The proposed rule wrongly asserts that a significant difference is owed to the determination made by the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, and prior refusals by the DEA to reschedule were decided using the same essential facts in favor of rescheduling, and the decision to reschedule did not satisfy the conditions set by the Controlled Substances Act, better known as the CSA. Dozens of Republicans in Congress are also resisting the rule through letters to Biden or last-minute amendments in the House and Senate. A bicameral letter from earlier in June was signed by 25 Republicans, led by Senator James Langford, Republican from Oklahoma, and Representative Pete Sessions, Republican from Texas. Pete Sessions is a big-time prohibitionist, just so you know. They argued that the proposed rule by the Justice Department, the DOJ, was poorly researched and pushed back on the administration's conclusion that marijuana had a low potential for abuse, you guys. In a quote, "Despite marijuana's prevalence and high rate of use, we still lack adequate and robust research on the drug," they wrote. Both the Congress members and Attorney General also took issue with the 2-part test that HHS employed to determine whether marijuana had a currently accepted medical use, and a drug is considered to have an accepted medical use if it was approved by the FDA, or if it was passed a 5-part test used by the DEA. There are adequate safety studies, its chemistry is known and reproducible. There are adequate and well-controlled studies proving efficiency, and the drug is accepted by qualified experts, and the scientific evidence is widely available. In lieu of this test, HHS employed a 2-part test asking whether there is widespread current experience with medical use of marijuana in the United States by licensed healthcare providers operating in accordance with implemented state-authorized programs, and if there exists some credible scientific support for at least one of the medical conditions for which Part 1 test is satisfied. In its opinion on the matter, the Office of Legal Counsel determined that the long-held 5-part test the DEA used to determine accepted medical use is impermissibly narrow, while also finding that HHS's 2-part test is sufficient to establish that a drug has a currently accepted medical use, even if the drug has not been approved by the FDA. With the content period now ended, the CSA dictates that the DEA must provide an opportunity for a hearing on the rule if requested. And the Hill has reached out to the DEA for comment on the GOP-led letters and whether a hearing on the rule will be held. And Karen O'Keefe, director of state policies at the Marijuana Policy Project, called the objection from the state attorney generals shocking and disappointing. I don't know why you think that's shocking. This is kind of crazy to me, but whatever. More than 14,000 Americans die every year from fatal overdoses on prescription opioids, Schedule II drugs, while suspected fatal overdoses on cannabis are vanishingly rare. I would say they don't even exist, but whatever. State AGs should not be trying to block progress on on acknowledging there is safer alternatives. And O'Keefe said in a statement to the Hill, says in a quote, a staggering 45 states, including 8 of those governors states, allow some seriously ill patients to use federally illegal cannabis products. It is past time federal law acknowledged reality. These public servants shouldn't be trying to stand in the way of progress, she added. Adult use marijuana among adults is legal in 24 states currently, and despite all the pushback, rescheduling to Schedule 3 still makes the manufacturing, distribution, dispensing, and possession of marijuana prohibited under the Controlled Substances Act. Subsequently, advocates for marijuana reform have continued to characterize the proposed rule as largely symbolic, apart from some potential tax benefits that marijuana businesses could take advantage of after rescheduling is completed, you guys. Well. Oh, hold on. I got another quote for you guys, because Kat Packer was brought into the mix on this. And Kat Packer, director of drug markets and legal regulation at the Drug Policy Alliance, called rescheduling a lateral move, and in quote says, there are folks who have said it's decriminalization, but I disagree, in part because the way that the Controlled Substances Act is set up, said Packer. In an additional quote, there's no change to criminalization, so there's a means by which the government can continue criminalization while just simultaneously, for the first time, acknowledging that there's currently accepted medical use. Packer's organization was part of an effort to facilitate public comments on the proposed rule, which presented an unprecedented opportunity for the public to weigh in on federal cannabis policy, you guys. The Drug Policy Alliance recently released findings from an analysis of the comments submitted on the proposal rule, which found roughly 70% were in favor of federal marijuana decriminalization, you guys. And in an additional quote, we found that of these more than 40,000 public comments, 69.3% of those comments supported descheduling, supported decriminalization, or legalizing marijuana at the federal level, Packer said. We also found that 42.4% of the comments that were submitted had some mention of federal reform needing to advance or address racial inequities and social justice. As recently as 2016, the DEA held that scheduling marijuana to anything other than Schedule 1 or 2 would be a violation of the International Treaties Act, and the proposed rule addressed these concerns, with the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel finding that moving the drug to Schedule 3 could still comply with international treaties if supplemental regulatory action were instituted, you guys. While the Attorney Generals argued this action is in violation of the CSA, Packer said she agreed with the determination, noting in quotes, there's nothing in the international treaties themselves that require the U.S. to place a particular drug in a particular schedule, and make no reference to U.S. policy or U.S. drug schedules, you guys. In an additional quote, she says, I actually think that it's harmful that we have political leaders who are suggesting, despite the evidence again in the year 2024, that marijuana should continue to be classified alongside drugs such as fentanyl, Packer said. She also says, I think that though other examples of substances like alcohol or tobacco or coffee or sugar, we can acknowledge that even when substances have some type of public health risk, the way that we can actually best mitigate that risk is to regulate that effectively, you guys. Well, man. I totally agree with pretty much everything Kat Packer said on this, and that's not oftentimes that I do, but nonetheless, I think this is some super, super interesting news, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this. This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News Hour. What do y'all have to say?
They moved the goalpost again.
4 foot dragging.
Yeah,
they're good at it.
I wish the Republicans would drop this argument though about this international treaty thing. I mean, because there's a number of different lawyers that have weighed in on this, and basically the U.S. pays a majority of the UN's budget, and so whatever we do, the UN is just going to follow along. So I just wish that they would stop using that as one of the arguments. But whatever.
Well, Germany's consciously going against it, and has had conversations to the fact that they're going to go against it. It's very old policy. So I think that maybe we should talk to Germany and tell them together.
I find it sad that out of 52.5 million Americans that consume cannabis in some form or another, that only 40,000 people weighed in on this. I find that really sad.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I did like a lot of the stats. Like a majority of them a majority of the comments called for full descheduling and for criminal justice reform. Which and what Kat mentioned is that even moving to Schedule 3 doesn't provide any type of criminal justice reform whatsoever. It just provides a new way for the drug war to kind of morph into something different. And I totally agree with her on that.
100%.
Yeah. I think people are disenchanted with our government and don't feel like it's worth taking the time to even weigh in on this because they don't feel they're going to be heard, and they know that the government is going to do whatever the fuck they decide to do, whether it's the will of the people or not. So I think that's probably why less people weighed in than should have and feel strongly about this, because they don't feel they'll be heard anyway.
That's a fair point too.
I don't think executive action is going to fix this. And this is all executive action.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Loper Bright case that took away the Chevron deference doctrine, we may see that come into effect here.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's definitely a pissing match between the two-part test at HHS, which I think is more reasonable, and the 5-part the DEA has, where they get to control 3 or 4 of those 5 parts, and they're never going to let you gather the evidence. Look how long it took Sue Sisley to get permission to give veterans weed to smoke to show that, it helps with my PTSD. Well, no shit, Sherlock.
Mm-hmm.
We've had to deal with DEA for so long that drag their feet every chance they get. This is just a clusterfuck from every direction. And you're right, Jenny Beth. People are just sick and tired of watching our government circle jerk each other and fight over everything and not actually get anything done. Congress has to change, has to remove marijuana from those statutes which allow for minimum mandatory sentences if you grow 100 or 1,000 plants, because descheduling is not going to change that. You're still going to go to prison. If you don't have a Schedule 3 license to grow weed and you grow 100 plants, you're going to prison for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's
exactly right.
We're just running around chasing our tails.
Mm-hmm.
Very discouraging.
Without a doubt. Well, it seems like we've come to a head on this, and I think we're all pretty much in agreement on this. Look at that, you guys! I found a story that we could all agree on. I think I'm going to win a prize today, you guys.